There is a figure that appears in Norse mythology in the oldest book of the Hebrew Bible, and in the story of a white-haired monster hunter who just wants to be left alone. Three completely different cultures, three completely different centuries, three completely different worlds. Same figure, same function, same misunderstanding. Every culture that ever encountered this figure called him the villain, the chaos bringer, the one who makes things worse, the enemy, and every ancient text that actually explains his function calls him something else entirely. Today, we're going to read the original text, and when we're done, you are going to look at every piece of suffering in your own life differently, because the question this figure was built to answer isn't who causes pain, it's what is pain actually for? His name, in Old Norse, is Loki. In Hebrew, he is Satan, which does not mean what you think it means. And in the world of The Witcher, he doesn't have a name at all. He is simply the thing Geralt of Rivia is forced to become every time the world refuses to let him stay neutral. This is episode 3 of the Myth Engine, and this is the one that changes how you read everything else. Let's start with what you think you know about Loki, because most of what you think you know comes from Marvel, and Marvel got it almost completely wrong. In the Marvel universe, Loki is Thor's adopted brother, the jealous younger son, the villain who wants what his sibling has. It's a clean, legible story. It makes Loki comprehensible. The Eddas, the actual Norse texts, written down in Iceland in the 13th century from a tradition at least 1,000 years older, tell a completely different story. In the prose, Edda, Loki is not Odin's son. He is Odin's blood brother, a peer, an equal. Odin swore a personal oath of kinship to Loki, which means the wisest, most powerful god in the Norse cosmos, looked at this chaos-bringing trickster of giant blood and said, "I choose him. I need him. That should stop you." Why would Odin, who sacrificed his eye for wisdom, who hung on the world tree for 9 days to understand the runes, who spends every waking moment preparing for Ragnarok, why would that god voluntarily bind himself by oath to the one figure in all the 9 worlds most associated with chaos and destruction? Because Odin understood something the other gods didn't. Here is what Loki actually does in the Norse myths. He solves problems the other gods can't solve. When the giant builder demands Freya as payment for constructing Asgard's walls, it is Loki who finds the trick that saves her. When Thor's hammer is stolen by the giant Thrym, it is Loki who engineers the plan to get it back. When the gods need the dwarves' most extraordinary craftsmanship, Odin's spear, Thor's hammer, Freya's necklace, Loki goes between worlds and negotiates it into existence. He is not a destroyer. He is a force that moves between fixed things and makes movement possible. The scholars who have studied Loki most carefully keep arriving at the same uncomfortable conclusion. You cannot remove Loki from Norse mythology without the entire system collapsing. Without Loki's chaos, the gods of order stagnate. Without disruption, there is no growth. Without the trickster, there is no story. One scholar put it this way: order without chaos is not paradise. It is stagnation. And stagnation in Norse cosmology is a kind of death. But here's the question the Norse myths are really asking. And it's the same question the Book of Job asks. And it's the same question Geralt of Rivia spends 8 novels and 3 games trying to answer. If the trickster is necessary, if suffering and disruption and the thing that breaks your comfortable life open is actually necessary, then what does that make the one who brings it? Is he the villain? Or is he doing a job that nobody else will do? Now I want to take you to a text that is approximately 3,000 years old. It is the oldest complete work of philosophical literature in recorded human history. It predates Plato by centuries. It predates most of the Hebrew Bible. Scholars believe it may have originally been written in a language other than Hebrew, possibly Edomite or Aramaic, and later translated and absorbed into the Jewish canon. It asks one question that no religion, philosophy, or ideology has ever fully answered. Why do bad things happen to good people? The book is called Job, and the figure everyone calls the villain in this story is not who you think he is. The story opens in what the text calls the heavenly court, not a place of harps and clouds, a formal assembly, a council of divine beings meeting before God to give account of their work. This is a bureaucratic image, an ancient Near Eastern king holding court, surrounded by advisors and functionaries. Each has a role, each has a mandate. Among them is a figure described in the Hebrew as Ha-Satan, with the definite article Ha, the Satan, not a Satan, not a name, a title, a role. The word itself in Hebrew means the adversary, the accuser, the one who opposes, and in legal terms, the prosecuting attorney. This is not the red-horned devil of later Christian art. That figure was assembled over centuries from Greek mythology, Zoroastrian theology, and political propaganda. It bears almost no relationship to the figure in Job. The Ha-Satan in Job is a member of the divine court. He reports to God. He acts only with God's permission. He never exceeds his mandate. He's not evil, he's adversarial, which is a completely different thing. His job is to test, to probe, to apply pressure to the things that claim to be solid and find out if they actually are. And here is what he does in the story. God says to Ha-Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and turns from evil." And Ha-Satan says, "Of course he's faithful. You've given him everything, a perfect life, a perfect family, perfect wealth, perfect health. His faith costs him nothing. Take it all away, then see what he's made of." This is not malice. This is the prosecuting attorney doing his job. He's not claiming Job is corrupt. He's saying, we don't actually know what Job is made of. We know what he looks like when life is good. We don't know what he is when it isn't. The only way to find out is to take away everything that makes faith easy. God grants the request. Everything is taken from Job, his wealth, his children, his health. He is left with nothing but the question, why? And then, for 35 chapters of extraordinary poetry, Job argues with God. He refuses to accept the easy answer. He refuses to say he deserved this. He refuses to perform false piety. He demands to know why a just God permits unjust suffering. And at the end of the book, after 35 chapters, God answers him, not with an explanation, with a question of his own. Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Do you know how deep the roots of the sea go? Do you understand the laws of heaven? The answer is, Job cannot know why. The universe is too large and too complex for any human mind to hold the full pattern. But here is the most important line in the entire book. It is the line that changes everything. At the end, after all the suffering is complete, God turns to Job's 3 friends. The ones who told Job he must have sinned to deserve this. The ones who gave the easy, comfortable, theologically tidy answer. And God says to them, "You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." The man who argued, the man who demanded answers, the man who refused to perform false comfort. That man was right. The ones who explained away his suffering, they were wrong. And without Ha-Satan, without the adversary who stripped everything away and forced the question to be asked honestly, none of that truth would ever have been reached. The prosecuting attorney was doing a necessary job, and the truth that emerged from the trial could only have emerged from that trial. Geralt of Rivia has one rule: stay neutral. Don't get involved in political conflicts. Don't take sides in wars between humans. Don't let the world's ugliness become your ugliness. Kill the monster, take the coin, move on. This is not a rule born from indifference. It's born from experience. Geralt has seen what happens when a witcher picks a side. He has watched every lesser evil become simply evil. He has made the choice between bad options enough times to know that every choice has consequences he cannot fully predict. So he draws a line: neutrality. It's the closest thing to wisdom that his brutal, morally grey world allows, and the world keeps crossing that line for him. This is Andrzej Sapkowski's central insight, Kansai. The one that separates The Witcher from almost every other fantasy story written in the last 50 years. Sapkowski understood that neutrality is not a position you can hold forever. It's a position you hold until the moment arrives when standing still is itself a choice. When doing nothing is the same as choosing the side that's winning. When the monster at the door isn't the kind you can put a silver sword through. And in those moments, every single time, Geralt acts. Not because neutrality failed, because he never confused neutrality with indifference. He was never indifferent. He just knew that acting without wisdom makes things worse. What makes Geralt a trickster figure, and this is the connection most readers miss entirely, is not that he lies or deceives, it's that he operates in the space between categories. He is not human and not monster. He is not hero and not villain. He is not aligned with the kingdoms that fight over power and not aligned with the non-humans they oppress. He stands at every crossroads simultaneously. He is the figure who lives in the boundary between things. That is exactly what Loki is in Norse mythology. Loki is not Aesir. He is giant blood accepted among gods. He is not monster and not divine. He moves between Asgard and Jotunheim, between the world of gods and the world of chaos, and he makes things happen that could not happen if anyone stayed on their own side of the line. And that is exactly what Satan is in the book of Job. Not evil, not good. The figure who stands in the court between God and humanity and says, let's find out what this person is actually made of. Let's not assume. Let's test. All three figures serve the same function. They are the force that prevents comfortable lies from going unchallenged. They are the thing that arrives when you have settled into a story about yourself that isn't fully true and breaks it open. Geralt arrives, and the village discovers it isn't as innocent as it thought. Loki arrives, and the gods discover their perfect order is more fragile than they believed. Satan arrives, and Job discovers that his faith was, until this moment, untested. The trickster is not your enemy. The trickster is the thing that finds out if you're real. Now let's apply this directly, because this is where episode 3 connects to the world you actually live in. You have a Loki in your life. Maybe it's a person, the one who always asks the uncomfortable question in the meeting, who refuses to let the comfortable narrative stand, who says out loud the thing everyone else has decided not to say. Everybody finds this person difficult. The institution has probably tried to get rid of them at some point. But think about what disappears when they leave. The last, honest voice in the room. Maybe your Loki isn't a person. Maybe it's a circumstance, a job loss, a diagnosis, a relationship that broke, a business that failed. Something arrived and stripped away the story you'd been telling yourself about your life. The story where everything was going according to plan, where your faith cost you nothing, where your character had never been genuinely tested. This is Satan doing his job. Not evil, not punishment, a test. And the question the book of Job is asking, The question that is 3,000 years old and has never stopped being urgent is this: what do you do when the comfortable story is taken away? Do you do what Job's friends did? Find an explanation that makes the pain feel deserved and therefore manageable. Tell yourself a story that restores the comfort even if it isn't true. Or do you do what Job did? Argue, demand, refuse false comfort. Sit in the difficulty until something real emerges from it. And at the societal level, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Every institution, every ideology, every civilization eventually produces its own "Hey, Satan," its own internal adversary, the whistleblower, the dissident, the satirist, the person in the press conference who asks the question nobody in the room wanted asked. These figures are almost always treated as villains in the moment. They destabilize, they break the comfortable story, they make everyone's job harder, and they are almost always, in retrospect, the most important person in the room. The Athenians called Socrates a corrupter of youth and executed him. 2,000 years later, we teach his method in every university on earth. Loki, in the Norse myths, does something that the Aesir gods never forgive him for. During the great feast of the gods, the Lokasenna, he stands up and says in front of everyone what is actually true about each of them: their cowardice, their corruption, their secret failures. He names everything they have all agreed not to name. The gods punish him for it, chain him in a cave, drip venom on his face until Ragnarok. But the myths are careful to note that everything he said was true. He was punished not for lying. He was punished for telling the truth at the wrong moment, in the wrong room, to people who were not ready to hear it. This is what the trickster figure is warning you about. In every mythology, in every century, in every culture that has ever named this function. The adversary you most want to silence is usually the one telling you something you need to hear. And the moment you bind them in a cave and stop their mouth, that is usually the moment your own Ragnarok begins to approach. Let's bring the three figures together one final time. Loki, blood brother of Odin, giant blood accepted among gods, shapeshifter who lives between worlds. The Norse trickster who builds the gods' greatest treasures and engineers their greatest catastrophes. Bound in a cave for telling the truth, waiting for Ragnarok. Satan, member of the heavenly court, prosecuting attorney of the divine assembly. The figure who asks God, "Do you actually know what your servant is made of?" Who strips everything away so the real answer can be found? Who was never a devil, never evil, never the enemy of God, just the adversary, the one appointed to oppose, to probe, to test. Geralt of Rivia, Witcher, neither human nor monster, neither hero nor villain. The figure who stands at the crossroads and refuses to choose a side until the world makes choosing unavoidable, who arrives in comfortable places and makes them confront what they actually are, who finds the monster and discovers it used to be a person. These three figures are not the same character, but they are the same function. They are what happens at the boundary between order and chaos. They are what arrives when a system, a pantheon, a person, a civilization has grown comfortable enough to stop being honest with itself. And the ancient texts are unanimous on one point. You do not get to grow without them. The Aesir needed Loki's chaos to remain dynamic rather than brittle. Job needed Satan's adversarial pressure to reach the deepest truth about his own faith. The villages of the Witcher's continent needed Geralt to arrive and name the thing they had all agreed not to name. The trickster is not your enemy. The trickster is the cost of knowing what you're actually made of. And here is the question this mythology has been asking for 3,000 years. The question it is still asking you today. When your Loki arrives, when the adversary appears and begins stripping away the comfortable story, what do you do? Do you chain them in a cave? Or do you listen? Because if the Norse myths teach us anything, it is this. You can bind Loki. You can silence him. You can pour venom on his face in the dark until he cannot speak. But he does not die. He waits. And eventually, always, inevitably, he gets free. So, 3 episodes in, here is where the myth engine stands. Episode 1. The Throne Trap. The structural mechanism that destroys everyone who sits in the seat of power, from Xerxes to Daenerys to the algorithm on your phone. Episode 2. The Cincinnatus Code. The only known escape from the throne trap, and why it is neurologically almost impossible to execute. Episode 3. The Trickster Function. The adversary who is not your enemy. The suffering that is not punishment. The voice you most want to silence, being the one you most need to hear. These 3 episodes are not separate topics. They are one argument. And episode 4 is going to show you where all 3 converge. There is a concept in Norse mythology, in Stoic philosophy, in the Bhagavad Gita, and in the world of Star Wars that describes what happens when a person fully accepts all 3 truths simultaneously. When they understand the trap, refuse the seat, hear the adversary, and then act anyway. The ancient word for this state is not hero. It is not saint. It is not enlightenment. The Stoics called it amor fati, love of fate, the complete acceptance of everything that arrives, without resistance, without performance, without the need for it to be different than it is. The Norse called it a different thing entirely, and what they called it changes everything you think you know about the ending of every story. That's next. Drop in the comments. Who is your Loki? The person or the circumstance that keeps breaking open the comfortable story? I want to know.